What's up, everybody? It's Spencer Alessi, and this is the Esports Narrative.
We had some life topics there. Like we went some deep. Yeah, we got deep a little there. I like the self-awareness, the failure, chat. I think we hit some really cool things. Thank you, Endless. I appreciate it. And for everyone listening in, I just forget my
for your own slogan.
I forget. Isn't that funny? Like I just had like a mental like. Hello. Good morning, good evening, good night. Welcome to episode 51 of the Esports Narrative. I am your host, Spencer Alessi, and this is a podcast that's all about the exploration of competitive video gaming and the passionate communities that make it so exciting. And joining me this time is a podcast host himself. He is Endless. He is at Endless55VG on Twitter. He's the host of the Time for Rolling Esports podcast, sometimes blogger about Vainglory, sometimes caster about Vainglory Esports Mobile. Mm-hmm. Endless, man, thanks for joining me tonight.
Dude, it is great to be here. I've been listening to you for a while now, and 51 just over the hill there.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been a good, it's been like seven months or something like that since I officially started, so it's been fun.
Goes by fast.
Yes, and I heard that you had a 1 year anniversary, right?
Yes, we did. We started a year ago in March, so our year flew by.
Awesome. And I do want to talk to you more about your podcast and how that got started and stuff. But first, I mean, I don't think we'd be doing justice if we didn't talk about the whole Ninja and Drake thing. Like
that is like the breaking news.
Like that, just over 600,000 people watched it. For anyone who's living under a rock, Ninja, the popular Twitch streamer, played with Drake, the musician. I played Fortnite last night, and it was just insane. I don't know if you caught any of it while it was happening, or like what did you think about that?
Yeah, so I watch Ninja every once in a while, and I have been hearing the rumors of possibly him teaming up with Drake once Drake followed him on Instagram. So I was keeping an eye on it for him to join. So when I heard that he was, going to do some duos, and then Travis Scott, the other rapper, he joined in, and then Juju Smith from Steelers. So a team of four with all very famous people. Does not surprise me that Ninja broke the record. And I don't know, Ninja is a monster. He's grinding like crazy. I never would have expected that. What he's been doing on Twitch so far in 2018, it's just been wild.
What do you think that means for like the culture of gaming, right? Because like these are like, world-renowned musicians, rappers. You mentioned Juju. He plays for the Steelers. So he's a professional athlete. Like, what do you think this means for gaming? You think it's going to be a good thing, the exposure for the gaming and esports community?
Yeah, I mean, I hope it can start to break that stereotype. There's the stereotype about how gaming can be bad, it can be harmful, and having these everyday people show that gaming can be a good thing. It's a hobby, and you see these extremely famous people enjoying it. It can show other people that this game, especially Fortnite. I guess Fortnite is what's kind of opening the door for everyone. But yeah, the mainstream media, you got Sports Center tweeting about it, and just every news channel kind of picking up, with Twitter blowing up at 1 a.m. on a random Wednesday night about these rappers playing with Ninja. Who the heck is Ninja? So I hope it can start leading towards that. Obviously, we see all the news channels and some people talking about how, gaming is bad, too much gaming, how much should your kid be playing? It can get a little frustrating, but I hope it will start leading us in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it's super cool, and just the randomness of it all, in like the whole macro aspect, like you said, it's just a random Wednesday, like out of the scope of things. They're like, there's no rhyme or reason other than just happening and kind of spur of the moment, which is really cool to see.
Yeah. I mean, that was not a prime time spot for Ninja to be doing that. And he didn't care. I mean, that's just when it worked for them. And look how many viewers he still pulled.
Yeah, for sure. So what's the earliest memories you have playing video games growing up?
So my whole life has been surrounded by video games. I played a lot of sports in high school. I was I was into just trying everything as much as possible. I have an older brother. He is the co-host of my podcast. So I kind of hung out with him and his friends happened to be gamers as well. So, I mean, early on we had, 64, the original Nintendo. We played all the Smash Bros, Mario, Star, Craft, we did everything with Nintendo. Then once we first got our first Xbox, we started with Xbox, worked our way through literally 360, Xbox One. Probably the favorite games we've played growing up. We did have a computer, like a really, really old computer that could barely run most games. But, we played some Ages of Empire, some RTS with Command and Conquer was another one we played. World of Warcraft, we played a little bit. My brother and I would get yelled at by mom. We had to take turns. We had set time when we could play because we only had one computer, and we would switch accounts off and on. But I was still pretty young, so I didn't really get into World of Warcraft that in depth. I kind of just ran around, did the main missions. I didn't do too much raids. That's what him and his buddies pretty much did, a lot of raiding. But throughout high school and getting into, as I got older, it was really a lot of first-person shooters, and I played a lot of Call of Duty. And I found Twitch, and that's when I started finding the genre of MOBAs, but I just didn't have a good gaming system or a PC set up to play League or Dota. So if I can throw out Vainglory, that is the first MOBA I actually found, and that was my first experience in the MOBA genre.
So would you say that Vainglory was kind of what introduced you to the esports world? I mean, obviously you were probably aware of it, with Call of Duty and other FPS and stuff, but like, what would be the one that you would say like got you really into this whole esports thing?
So surprisingly, this is very ironic, and I'm not lying when I say this, but Ninja actually did, because freshman year in college, so like 4 years ago, I found Ninja on Twitch because I started finding Twitch, and I would literally go to browse, and like if it was a big weekend for League of Legends, I would watch the esports. So I knew about esports. I knew it was a thing. I just didn't really find anything that I would religiously watch. I was a fan of TSM, but then I found Ninja, and I was still into Halo back when I was younger. I played a lot of 2v2 LAN party Halos with my brother and his older friend. So I watched him stream, and I saw that he was on competitive teams. And during that time, he was jumping around on a bunch of different teams. But I started watching the Halo competitions just to watch Ninja because I was a fan of him. And then I stopped watching Ninja, and then here we are today, and Ninja's back. So it's kind of crazy to be like, I kind of watched him 5 years ago, and now he's back and big. So it's cool to see, like, yeah, I watched him when he had 2,000 views, and now he's at 100,000 every day.
Yeah, it's kind of cool full circle kind of thing, and to see someone come from humble beginnings and now just seeing all the hard work and the effort and the determination pay off in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you say esports is exploding and so exciting right now? Like in the media, major athletes, professional athletes, and other big sports are all kind of flocking to this. Overwatch League is huge. It's a massive endeavor. League of Legends is a huge, massive league. Why do you think right now it's the time where it's getting more and more exposure, and it's becoming a thing where people can no longer ignore? They can't ignore this thing now. Why do you think that is right now?
Well, this is when I wish I had a business degree and had been going to school for business, because the business side of esports is just insane, which is why I listen to podcasts like yours and, Esports Boom and stuff. But, there's so many big names realizing like the benefits of esports, and just, I guess, business side, you have the big names of Shaq and all these big people, buying into the vision and the Echofox and all these other big companies. Kid wise, you have the parents who don't really understand what gaming is, and like, I don't want my kid sitting around and just playing video games all day. But then they realize, like, look, your kid or your child could actually have a really, really, successful future with this, and it could be a really good environment. They can meet a lot of great people and have, I guess I could just say, a lot of money and make a good living for yourself if you get on a top org and if you are a top player. But I still think it's just like this really slow process of just, the mainstream talking about it and people just understanding what gaming is as a whole, and like just the community we have is much bigger than just someone sitting in your parents' basement just playing a video game.
Yeah, for sure. And with this excitement, there's been, mobile esports is what I want to talk about next. Mobile esports isn't necessarily a new concept or it's been talked about as long as I've been following esports deeply for like the past 9 months or so. There's there's games like Vainglory now that are coming, that are being more predominant in mobile. There's Arena of Valor and Clash Titan, or was it Clash of Titans or Clash of Clans? Clash Royale, sorry. So there's a lot of these mobile games that are now feeding into the system, and I'm curious what you think about the mobile, like the current state of mobile esports, where it is now, and then where do you see this going in like 3 to 5 years?
Right. So, I mean, we talk about stereotypes outside, let's say, in the generic world where people have stereotypes about video games as a whole. Within the video game community, I feel like we still have a really, really big stereotype on mobile gaming, as a whole, I should say. Like, we have people that say, why would I want to play a game on my phone when I can play on a console or like a really nice gaming PC? Or, oh, you play a game on your phone, you must be playing a Facebook game like Candy Crush or, a simple game like that. But what people don't realize is the technology has been, our technology has been growing like crazy. People are having, companies like Razer, they're finding some crazy ways to create phones and devices that can run, engines and software that can run a game beautifully at 120, hertz. I'm obviously going to always, quote Vainglory because that's where I know most of my information from. But mobile as a whole in the industry, people are seeing that it is growing, tenfold. Tencent, obviously, Arena of Valor, they are like the biggest company out there. They're bigger than Facebook. They, own parts of League of Legends. Obviously, Arena of Valor in honor of kings is what it's called in China. I mean, you look at China literally is dominated by mobile. Everyone has phones there. They're not as big into PC and consoles. Everyone is playing on their phone. Literally, the Chinese government is like trying to limit Honor of Kings, and like Tencent is having like, if you're under 12, you can only play Arena of Valor for an hour, and then up. It's insane, definitely in that market over there. So there are different markets, and I feel like our regions, the western side, is a little different than out there. But you just look at game revenue overall, and then you look at mobile revenue, and a lot of people are realizing how much mobile gaming is bringing in. And then now you have Fortnite joining mobile. I mean, will Fortnite be competitive mobile? I would say no, just because of you obviously have consoles and the PC. But just the fact that everyone's been seeing Fortnite on Twitter and all these other social media places, now they can play it on their phone as well. And maybe they don't have an Xbox, PlayStation, or a whatever $1,500 PC to play it. I mean, it's crazy how even Fortnite, how big they will help grow this mobile market.
Yeah, and like you said, not everyone has an expensive gaming PC that they can play with. And a lot of games now have really high graphics requirements and things like that for desktop. So I'd imagine the accessibility, everyone has a mobile device, an iPhone or an Android or something equivalent that can run these games. So the barrier to entry is quite low.
Yeah.
Now, I saw something that you tweeted out on your TFR Esports account, and it was about Immortals announced that they have a mobile division, I guess. They call it Immortals Mobile. So they're the first really that I know has officially come out and like said, okay, we have a mobile division now. What do you think that means for Immortals and for kind of like the esports ecosystem as a whole? You think other orgs are going to follow suit and kind of follow this trend?
Yeah, so Immortals is a little interesting just because they were in the Vainglory scene. They had a team, and they kind of dropped out of Vainglory, and Tribe Gaming picked them up, and Tribe went on to win Worlds. And Immortals left Vainglory, and it was kind of
I get your tweet now.
You get my tweet now?
I get your tweet now.
My tweet was maybe a little salty, just because I wish Immortals, of course, stuck around. And their tweet was big on Arena of Valor, and that's kind of where they are, I feel like, heading towards. Their leader of the mobile is Suijay. He is from the Vainglory community. He started there. He's a professional player as Vainglory. He played for Immortals, and he kind of bounced around. He was with Team Liquid. So seeing Suijay go over to Immortals is huge for him. And like him running mobile is the best thing for Immortals. It's interesting to see them. They are a big org. We'll have to see what other orgs decide to do when it comes to the mobile market, but I think Immortals is realizing where the market's going, especially again with Arena of Valor. They have They've already announced a little bit a teaser with a tournament coming up that's worth like 500,000, prize pool. So having Arena of Valor have that much money involved is going to be big. Of course, orgs are going to jump all over it. It's not a surprise.
Now, I want to read to you. I mean, I'm sure you know it. You know the game very, very well. But I want to read the Super Evil Megacorp mission statement for everyone listening. And I just want to talk about it because I think it's, as I was learning about Vainglory and like kind of digging into the ecosystem a little bit, I thought this was interesting. And I'm almost like, if you could see me, I'm almost laughing right now because of how unique this mission statement is. So I'll just read it and then I just want to talk about it. Super Evil Megacorp's mission is to build the best core gaming experience for the touchscreen generation and thereby the most played games in the world. We seek to destroy the productivity of mankind with endlessly entertaining games. We challenge the notion that touchscreens are for harvesting crops and slicing fruit. Secretly, phones and tablets are all deadly weapons waiting to be put to use. Now, the middle part of that, like the destroying the productivity of mankind, I think is hilarious. I think it's awesome. And I really commend them on this mission statement because I think it's both serious and funny and edgy, all like wrapped into one. And I'm curious to you, because you know the game extremely well, how well do you think they deliver on that mission statement?
Right. I mean, SCMC, like really obviously super evil megacorp. They love to pride themselves on, having a fun time when they're literally creating a game and they're having fun doing it. I had the chance to go out to San Francisco and check out the Lair. That's what they call their office, and see everyone at work there. And it's really just it's a crazy environment. Everyone is working really hard. And then when they released 5v5 in December, their big slogan was never settle for lesser evil. So, they're just striving to create the best thing. And Vainglory as a whole, I feel like they wanted to create the best, product out there. And I have seen a lot of people, challenge this MOBA on a phone, and they're like, why can't I should just play on a PC? We have League and Dota. And Vainglory really likes to always say, we want to, give the best gaming experience on every platform possible. That we have these devices that can, run crazy technology, and we can create a game that is just as good and maybe even better graphics than a game like League of Legends and be just as competitive on your phone. Then Vainglory wants to do that. So I love their marketing team at SCMC, and then their mission statement as a whole is definitely one that is one of my favorites.
Yeah, I came across that in my research. And I was like, wow, that's really good. And like I said, there's a lot of things that made me smile about it. And you mentioned the 5v5 ranked coming out later this year. What do you think this means for Vainglory? Because previously this had always been a 3v3 game. Is that right?
Yeah. So they started literally. The game was officially launched in 2014, I think, and they literally started in one of the creators' kitchen, just starting this idea. And at the time, the technology that the phones offered, they felt like 3v3 was their best option. I'm not going to quote him directly because I don't have the article pulled up, but the CEO, Christian, talked about how at the time mobile was really Candy Crush. So they wanted to kind of ease their way into the mobile market with a 3v3 MOBA. And they always had the 5v5 on the horizon, probably thinking that's where they wanted to go. And once their engine is literally called the Super Evil engine. That's the engine they run the game on. And they worked on it to get it to be able to run 5v5. Not only run 5v5, but also have a fog of war, which is a really important mechanic it's a level of vision on a mobile device. So having them release 5v5 is something the community wanted almost immediately once 3v3 competitive was happening. 3.1 update is dropping like right now. So 5v5 ranked is coming out, and 5v5 competitive will be starting in April with the preseason, and then June with the regular season of the Vainglory Premier League. So it is a big change. It's almost like starting over because a lot of teams are undecided, like big orgs, I should say. Like some of them are leaving. Like we did see Cloud9 step away from the scene just because there's been a lot of downtime. As a business, you want to step back and see, let's watch how 5v5 is going to operate, how the scene will play out, because it's going to be a whole different ballgame from 3v3.
And how critical do you think the esports community is of any game, not necessarily Vainglory specifically, but if that's the one the most, but how critical do you think the esports community is as a whole to the success of the game, as a whole? Like, how important is the competitive part of a game, and how much does that weigh on the overall success of a game, do you think?
So just from the numbers that I know of people that just play Vainglory, I feel like not everyone obviously is watching esports and competitive, but at the same time, that's where a lot of the money is involved with the game, and a lot of big orgs are involved. So the esports side is extremely important. So when you see a game that's 3v3, and then now you start having, maybe there's some competitors with Arena of Valor. Like, obviously Vainglory's only option was to go 5v5 to compete with not only other mobile games, but to compete literally with League of Legends and Dota. I really think that game has enough depth and a skill cap, because the biggest argument is, it doesn't take any skill to play the game. Trust me, I suck at the game. It takes a lot of skill. Like, I don't have enough time to practice enough to be actually good. So I'm just going to be stuck at mid-tier with all the other people that are noobs at the game. So I think the esport community is important outside of just the casual gamers. And I think Vainglory as a whole, since I'll talk about the community I know, they're very critical of SCMC. They definitely like to voice their opinions, and SCMC tries to do their best to make casual players just as happy as the competitive players and the competitive fans. So it's definitely a hard, I feel like, tightrope to walk on.
Yeah, and I think every game has that problem too. I used to be into World of Warcraft a lot. I played a lot of World of Warcraft growing up, and I've played in every expansion to some extent. And you always see, in every expansion, there's the competitive people who really want PvP to be a certain way, and then there's the raiders that want it to be a certain way, and there's the more RTS style people who want the storyline and the quest to be a certain way, and the dungeons and the lore to be a certain way. And
right.
I think that as long as if the esports community is making the game better, I think the game as a whole benefits. But I can see that it's a difficult, tightrope to cross for sure, depending on like how the game is actually built or designed or structured.
Yeah, and Twitch is a good way to get your game out there, obviously, and a lot of people are going to maybe stumble across the game on Twitch. There's many games I've stumbled upon on Twitch just from seeing it popular on the browsing page, or a famous streamer doing an ad for it. So the esports scene will be important. Just to say, if it's a big weekend for Vainglory, Twitch may feature Vainglory on the front page, and someone may stumble across it and watch it for the first time and be like, wait a minute, this looks really fun. I can play it on my phone. Maybe I'll download it. So esports and Twitch, those are kind of intertwined. You've talked about on your show how important Twitch and esports, they kind of go together. So Vainglory can only advertise as much as possible to find a normal person on YouTube or Facebook, see an ad for Vainglory to download it, or you can also run with the esports side and have someone see that competitive scene and be like, maybe if I practice hard enough, I can be like them, which can be very difficult to do.
So I want to ask you something that maybe you haven't really been able to talk about a lot, or maybe you have on your podcast, but let's see. What's your biggest pet peeves in Vainglory when you're playing?
When I'm playing?
Yeah, let's say when you're queuing up or you're playing, like what's the biggest thing that drives you crazy, like with other players, or when things happen in the game, or like what's your biggest pet peeves?
So I feel like communication is really hard, and it's something that SCMC struggles with just because it's a very hard thing to balance. You want to offer players as enough communication as possible to be able to appropriately communicate what you want to do during the match. Now that's 5v5, there's 3 lanes, there's a lot of objectives, and it takes a lot of synergy. Okay, do we want to split push? Should we, go get the Black Claw or Ghost Wing, which are 2 main objectives in the middle of the map, kind of like you have in League. And 5v5 is super early, so you have a lot of people starting over trying to learn the game. So right now we are in an interesting state of like everyone's trying to figure out what to do, but a lot of people want in-game chat, and that's hard because of toxicity and people literally being, I guess the gaming community would say, flaming people and saying inappropriate things, and that's just something Vainglory does not want to deal with. They don't want to deal with more toxicity. We already have enough of it. Other than that, it's just the typical people just raging and getting really mad. I mean, I'm guilty of it at times as well. You just need to step back and realize it's just a game. Like, even though you lose one match, it's not that big of a deal. And I think Vainglory is really small still, and having the content creation come through to have more gameplay, more guides, more help will be really important for its future, just to allow those new gamers to figure out how to play Vainglory. Because I think Vainglory is at the state where there's going to be a lot of new gamers, a lot of new players coming in, that you're going to want to have them pick up on the game as quick as possible.
Yeah, and that seems to be a trend. When a game has popularity, you get a massive flood of people, and then the developers are kind of scrambling to kind of tweak things or to address things that are, maybe on their roadmap, but now they want to address it sooner, so they have a better product for the massive amount of people that are flooding to it. What are some trends that you've noticed, like since you've been paying attention to Vainglory, since you've been playing it? What are maybe some trends that you've noticed either in the game or in kind of like the Vainglory world in and of itself?
So SCMC is kind of known for working with the community as much as possible. They want to listen to the community, find out what we're complaining about, what we want fixed, and they literally will do, sometimes they bend over backwards to try to help and work with the community to get them what they want. And sometimes, personally, I think too much. I think sometimes SCMC needs to like put their foot down and literally be like, no, this is how it's going to be, get over it. Just because, again, the community likes to complain about this needs to be changed, this needs to be changed. And sometimes our community is young. Like Vainglory does have a young community. I'm talking like the pro players are even younger than what the normal esports scene is. We have tons of high schoolers. We got some 14-year-olds that are literally the best players in Vainglory out there. And so some immaturity and stuff comes with it. So SCMC as a company, who is already an extremely small company when you look at other esports and other companies that are making a title that runs in esports, they can only handle so much. They only have so big of an esports team. They only have such big of a balanced team to try to balance a quote unquote broken hero. So in the community as a whole, one of the biggest things I noticed is that Vainglory literally will do anything they can to make their community happy, but sometimes it's still just not enough for everyone. And, that's just the way life is, I guess. Not everything's going to happen the way, you want it. And sometimes I want people just to take a step back and be like, look, Vainglory is still 4 years old. Like, they're really young, and they're hopefully going to continue to grow and learn from some past mistakes.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that, because, you look at other games that have been around for very, very long time. Like CounterStrike has been around for a while. You look at these games and how they've transitioned over the years and how they've been able to sustain themselves. It's interesting that the game is just a few years old, and some would consider that old, some would consider that young, but they've developed so much in such a short amount of time. But then you look at like how long this game could be, around, and you think, wow, okay, right. The things that they're doing take time, and it'll be polished, and just imagine it in like 3 years, like what it will look like is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think all titles have their issues. Obviously, Overwatch, they've been going through their growing pains with the league and having issues with players. And, I see tweets about players need to unionize, and like the Overwatch League players are having some issues. So it doesn't matter how big the company is, whether it's Blizzard all the way down to I don't remember how many devs right now are at SCMC, but not that many. And, everyone's going to have their issues, and sometimes it doesn't work out like you wanted it to, but I think the Overwatch League and those big games are paving the way for some of the smaller titles that are trying to, grow in this esports scene.
So you mentioned the players and some of them being super young and still high school. Who are like the teams to beat right now, and like just identify some of the top teams or maybe the top organizations in Vainglory, and who are the ones that everyone is gunning for?
All right, so right now, again, 5v5 is just coming out. So we are at a difficult place of knowing exactly what's going to happen. Tribe Gaming, which is run by Chief Pat, huge YouTuber. He does a lot of mobile games, Clash Royale. He started Tribe Gaming. He picked up the old Immortals roster, the 3v3 roster, and he took that team to Worlds, and they won. After Worlds, Cloud9 decided it was time to step away from Vainglory, and they dropped their 3 members. So we kind of predicted it, but Chief Pat went after the 3 Cloud9 players and picked them all up. And now we kind of have this super team forming with Cloud9 and Tribe becoming one. So I would say Tribe Gaming right now is number one. TSM, Team Solo Mid, of course, a big org. They have been in Vainglory for a while. They haven't made the announcement they're staying. We have been seeing 5 players play underneath the tag TSM. I think this is like a tryout phase. Flash X, who was the captain, I feel like he's more of a coach now, and he's taking a higher position within the TSM org as a whole. I think they're waiting for TSM to decide. So we technically, I think, could lose another big org, but I would predict that TSM would stick around, and I would put them at number 2 just because they also picked up some of the top players that are pretty young that came out of a challenge team, some of the new upcoming talent, plus with a couple of veterans. So I would say that they'd be right behind Tribe Gaming. So after that, I feel like a lot of teams have a lot to prove. You add 2 members to a 3-man roster. You have to learn how to balance. I'm not maybe going to be getting every kill. It's a whole new game now with the 5. We've compared it to the NBA, Kevin Durant, and all these other big players that kind of team up to form these super teams. You can throw all the top talent together, but it may not work out if there's some issues behind the scenes or they butt heads in communication during the game. So it's going to be interesting to see how it works out. Early on in Vainglory's esports career history, with 3v3 starting out, we had like 2 teams that pretty much dominated everyone, and it was honestly kind of boring. The scene was pretty stale. So hopefully that doesn't happen in the beginning of 5v5, and hopefully the competitive scene is pretty balanced like it was at the end of 3v3 at the end of 2017 last year.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see kind of how this 5v5 pans out. And like you said, it's going to be exciting, and to see kind of, because it's like not a new game mode, because it's a new format essentially, and there's going to be more people in the map, and there's going to be, the coordination is going to be different. Like you said, everything is going to be kind of different, and it's going to be interesting to see how teams adapt from the 3v3 to the 5v5 style. And I'm curious to see if that is more exciting or if that draws in a larger audience for the Vainglory team and all that. So I'm super excited to see all that kind of pan out.
Yeah, I paid attention to a lot of the numbers towards the end of 2017, and we'll just see, how big the growth really is, and if the noise Vainglory makes does attract some bigger orgs, and we get some of these top tier orgs come in and pick up a team and run with Vainglory. And I think 2018 will be a good year. I think it's gonna be a big growing year though. I think SMC is definitely taking a step back. Let's figure 5v5 out. Let's do it right. And I think 2018 will be a good year to kind of justify 5v5 and Vainglory being the top title on mobile.
Yeah, now here's an interesting question. Do you think there's room for all these massive games, right? Like CounterStrike, League of Legends, Dota, huge games. And now Overwatch is kind of vying for a major spot. Call of Duty is vying for a major spot. Halo is maybe having a resurgence. H1Z1. You got PUBG and Fortnite and Vainglory and the mobile games. Like, do you think that there's feasibly enough room for everything? Like, what do you think this will look like in 5 or 10 years as far as like the major games and like as we know it today? Do you think it's going to be different?
I mean, it is almost hard for me to picture it, just because we've seen how much the scene has changed in the last year, 2 years, 5 to 10 years out. Like, who knows what will be happening in games at that time. You look at Overwatch being at the top, the NBA 2K League with all these big teams getting involved. Will every title see that? I'm not sure if that will be possible to see every single game out there have that big companies involved, big, even real sports teams involved. It'll be interesting to see. I always, I like to watch the older people I follow that are much more in business and been around for a while on Twitter, but they're always tweeting out the more the merrier, the more games that are in, the more exposure. And that's just the whole goal, is just to get more exposure overall. And even though there is competition, like I'm a diehard Vainglory through and through, AOV, we hate it, but it's good to have Arena of Valor in the scene, to have that competition, just like Dota and League. They are that competing game together, and I hope other mobile titles can start coming into the scene and have that competition and just again, as long as more people are watching esports as a whole, that's all that matters.
For sure. It's definitely one of those things where like the cream will rise to the crop, or the cream of the crop will, rise to the top, and the ones who execute the best and have the best, game and have the best exposure or the best marketing and in attention grabbing, the ones who really do it well and execute well will be at the top, and the ones that don't will kind of be left to the wayside, and maybe they'll still exist, but maybe they won't be as popular as the tier ones. And I, for one, would be kind of excited to see the games that are super popular now to kind of take a dive in lieu of other games reclaiming that spot for like the dominant, like most popular game, just to see how, just because I'm curious to see how that whole ecosystem would look if like CounterStrike and League of Legends weren't the top two, esports anymore.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, look what Fortnite did in like this, I don't know, 6 months or how many ever months it's been. They've grown, they've grown so fast. You have no idea when the next title is going to, I mean, obviously Fortnite hasn't really found themselves in the esports scene quite yet. We'll see what's going to happen with that. But Overwatch, they grew pretty fast stuff. Of course, it's Blizzard. So you knew they were going to try to do that right. And having the huge league and probably the most professional league we've seen yet. It'll be interesting to see, obviously, like other orgs are going to be looking towards Overwatch. I mean, like we want to try, or not other orgs, other esports titles are going to be looking at that and trying to, imitate it or do their own version of it. So, I mean, seeing Halo come back and, back to what it was a while ago and even bigger with the new audience would be crazy. Is it possible? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see.
For sure. So let's talk about your podcast. Time for Rolling Esports Podcast. First of all, where does the name come from? And what kind of got you on this track? Like, why did you start your podcast?
All right. So I got into podcasts really not that long ago, probably about 1.5 years ago. I kind of found podcasts and I literally just started listening to everything from like the famous ones, just Joe Rogan Experience and just the top podcasts. And then, there was the Shatter the Vane podcast, which is a Vainglory podcast. I kind of listened to that as well. And I just love podcasts. I love the idea of it. You just sit down and talk about something you really enjoy. So I kind of was joking around with my brother. We both love, Vainglory. We love the esports scene particularly. So we always were texting each other, always were, going back and forth about, oh, did you see this happen? You see this happen in the scene? And I finally, it was spring break. And I was just like, what if we just tried to start our own podcast? And we tried to find something that hadn't been done yet. And there wasn't a podcast just about esports within Vainglory. So like, what if we had our own podcast and we literally, all we did was just cover the esports scene of Vainglory, talk about players, tournaments, that kind of stuff. So at the same time, we have guilds in Vainglory. You can have up to 50 people in your guild. It's kind of like a community, and, guilds kind of compete for that top guild spot, which guild can grind the most. There's a guild called Time for Rolling. It's called Time, that had just started their own kind of side podcast. So I reached out to those leaders and I pitched them my idea, and so we decided to do like a little flagship and start like our own little brand of Time for Rolling. So we had 2 podcasts. Now it's really just the esports one that's still running. So Time for Rolling comes from my guild. I represent my guild, and this Time for Rolling specifically comes from a character within Vainglory named Lance. He's a captain, and one of his voice lines is Time for Rolling, and he like rolls around on the map. So it's like a play on Vainglory. It's very specific to Vainglory. So when you hear Time for Rolling, if you've never played Lance and had your sound on, to hear him say Time for Rolling, you probably have no idea what my podcast is about. But I like it just because the really, really close Vainglory community knows what it is.
Yeah, that's super cool that it's so like niche that it's, if you know what it is, and if you don't, it's kind of like an inside joke in a way. Like
yeah,
the people who are hardcore really know.
Yeah. So we started it, and my brother and I were not expecting, like, we really enjoyed it. Us working together, it was, hard at first because it was a big change for us. We normally just watched esports on the weekend and, just watched them, and we could do other things. And then we started doing the podcast, and we started like taking notes and taking some stats so we could have more to talk about on the show. So it did become a little bit of a work, but I feel like I got over that hump of feeling like that I was working instead of just enjoying it. Because that was my main thing. I didn't want to do the podcast and hate it. Like, I wasn't doing it for fame or numbers. Obviously, first of all, I'm doing it with Vainglory. That's not the biggest game yet. So it was really just for me to talk about the game and put it out there. And if I had 5 people that also love Vainglory Esports listening to it, then that was great for me. So it's been fun so far. And the fact that we made it through a full year and survived. And now I did a lot of research on podcasts, and that's like the big thing. They say your first year is going to be the test. And then after that is when you can really kick off.
So what's kept you going all this way? Like you said, I heard you say something I want to touch on is like you didn't want it to feel like a job, or you didn't want to feel like it was like something that was dragging you down. Like you were doing it because you enjoyed Vainglory and you enjoyed talking about it and learning about it. So what was it that kind of kept you going when it was like, or did you have any periods where you were kind of like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, or this is getting to be like more of a thing that's expected of me, more like a job kind of thing? Like what kept you going the past year to keep producing and keep creating and stuff?
I think it was the more and more interaction with the community and just people tweeting at us, and some people saying, just from hearing, talking in game, or someone messaging me and being like, hey, you're the host of that podcast. And they're like, keep it up. And it was just like more of this encouragement and be like, okay, people do like what we're doing. My brother and I, of course, on the weekends, we literally played a lot of Vainglory, and then that kind of stopped when we had to be watching, because at the time, Vainglory, like EU would start at like 10 a.m. and then EU would go, and then NA would pick up when EU finished, and NA wouldn't finish until like 10 o'clock. So it was almost 12 hours Saturday, Sunday. So that's and I'm in college. I have a social life. My brother, he works, he has a big social life. So it's hard to commit to that weekend of 12 hours. So we started to work out how we can watch as much as possible, not, burn ourselves out from doing it. And it was just the excitement of where Vainglory can go in the future. And it's like, hey, we're here in the beginning. As long as we're loving doing it, let's just stick it out and see where it goes. And, in 4 to 1 year from now, whatever it is, if our lives go a different direction where we can't keep up with it, then, we stop it. It's not a big deal. It's not like the podcast is supporting me right now. It's totally a side project. That's a passion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's along the lines of why I started the podcast, was because I've always had a passion for video games, right? I grew up playing them. I played competitively in CounterStrike, online, and like tried to do like the team thing. I played WoW a lot, played a lot of PvP, so I've always been into, video games, and I always loved it. And I thought this would be a good chance for me, much like you, to kind of like explore, this world of esports that's getting more and more attention, and see like what is everyone up to, like who are these people and what are their backgrounds and how did they get into it, and all this stuff that I talk about on the show. And so that really resonates with me, of like what you said. And I'm curious, what are some lessons you've learned along the way? Like, you've done this for a year. It's quite a feat to say you've accomplished something and stuck with it and been consistent for a year. Like, no doubt you've had some lessons that you've learned along the way, either good ones or bad, like positive lessons, or, maybe micro failures or something like that. But what are some things you learned along the way?
Yeah. So, I'm still pretty young. Like, I'm in college. I'm actually studying speech pathology. So I'm like in the health field. So I don't really have much experience with business. And not that my podcast is a complete business, but I have to work with people. I have to work with my brother very closely, which, we're brothers. We grew up fighting each other, playing video games. We're competitive people. So, we have our disagreements, and that's been a great thing for us to work together closely and just, learn how to work with each other. When it comes to working with other people, just being as a college student, I could walk up to any person and interview them in a heartbeat. Like, I'm just used to it. It's just like my public speaking skills. I feel like I've gotten a lot better when it comes to just running the podcast. It's actually been crazy how much I have gotten out of this crazy side project just for fun. But failures, my brother and I realized that, we definitely, if there's ever a time that we don't like the direction the podcast is going, we don't need to worry about what other people will think. We just need to take a step back and go back to the original of, maybe it just needs to be me and him, just, talking about whatever we want, just having fun. We don't need to be proving anyone right or wrong. We don't have anything to prove. This is for us. And if no one else wants to listen, then that's fine. there's been a lot of things that we've made some small mistakes here and there, and it's been a good learning, a learning just because of people that I work with on the inside that don't really come on the podcast. Older people that are definitely in the business world have been, teaching me some little life lessons here and there, which has been really helpful.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like you mentioned something I want to touch on was like the expectations of others. That's something that I think a lot of people struggle with, is they care so much about what other people think about them or what they're doing that it kind of paralyzes them. It stops people from doing things. And your 1 year is like a testament to, to the opposite of like, you're doing this, and yes, you're probably getting feedback and this and that, but ultimately I'm curious how you deal with, not necessarily criticism, but how do you deal with like that expectation of other people, like of what you're doing, and how do you kind of like juggle that or like deal with the thoughts and opinions of other people, and how does that weigh on you?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point. And so in Vainglory, a lot of people kind of have this, belief that if you're not what we would call VG10 or vainglorious, that's the highest level on ranked, meaning you've grind the whole tier system to get very high up. You're a very strong player. If you're not VG10, then you know nothing. You don't know anything about the game. Your opinion doesn't matter. And that has been one challenge for my brother and I, because we don't play enough to be, tier 10 players. We are tier 6, tier 7. We're right around the mid tiers. And we literally are casual fans of Vainglory talking about the game. And that is an issue we struggle with, is because we don't always know the best thing that pros should be doing. We watch enough that we know meta, we know what players are best and stuff. So we try to bring on, and that's something we're trying to work on, is bring on a guest who is a very high tier player, whether they've had experience as an analyst or they've done, work within an org or been on a competitive team, to try to give that an extra voice on our show that does have a little more experience with maybe just numbers or knowing stats. And I do my best to read patch notes and see what's changed and what builds are best. But I'm not a top tier player. I haven't competed. So I think my brother and I wanted to be just literally casual fans, fanboying or fangirling, however you want to say it, over our favorite teams and just talking about how crazy that, reverse sweep was. But some people want facts. Some people want numbers. And early on, I was like, well, I need to do this or I need to change this. And then as I, started figuring out, what direction I want my podcast to go, it was more of like, no, literally my description is two casual fans talking about Vainglory Esports. That's what we are. And if you want a competitive, more of a, ex-pro podcast, then someone needs to start that up, because there isn't one in the Vainglory scene right now.
How important do you think that self-awareness is? Like everything you said to me is just self-awareness and like really understanding yourself and realizing that you're not professional, yet you have a certain level of acumen or however you say it of the game. Like you have a certain level of skill, and you have the self-awareness to be like, hey, listen, we have this level of skill. This is what we think. This is how we feel about this. How important do you think it is to have that self-awareness, both like in life, like taking, not even talking about video games for a moment, but like how important do you think that is in life to have that self-awareness of like what you're good at and where your talents are and what you're maybe not so good at?
Yeah, I mean, you got to stick to your guns. You have to understand like what your goals are and where your future lies. And as long as you're doing something you're passionate about, that's all that matters. I mean, I don't care if some 15-year-old is a VG10, makes fun of me because I got something wrong. That's not what I'm not here to be perfect on everything I do when it comes to numbers. So my self-awareness has even grown even more within my blog. I do a lot of write-ups about Vainglory and stuff. And I kind of take a funny side. I just throw out opinions, and I don't write some stats, or I don't write an article that's going to help someone become a better player. I just like to talk about whatever comes to my mind on my blog. And that's another thing that I don't really like to use the word blog. I would say write-ups. I don't really like to call them blogs, but
blog is a fine word. I like the word blog.
I read an article where someone says you shouldn't call your blog a blog. So now it's just stuck in my head for some reason. But yeah, I mean, the self-awareness, like you said, it is an important, I guess, trait to have throughout your life, not only in esports. I mean, this is like my second life. I mean, my friends and everyone really know that I do this. They don't follow my endless account. They don't follow my time for only account. They follow my Tyler, my real name account. And they kind of know that I am a fan of Vainglory or a fan of esports. And I'm a big pusher of esports. I like to talk to my friends about, hey, did you see this person has 180,000 subs and they make $900,000 a month? And like, what? That's possible. But yeah, it's just like, even though this is like my second life right now, maybe one day my two lives will like join together to become just one instead of living two different lives.
It's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Like, you have these two worlds.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite episode that you have ever recorded for the TFR Esports podcast?
Man, we interviewed Fuji, who is the marketer of esports. He just like does everything for them with two casters, Tasty Bacon and Humanist. And that was like huge for us. That was kind of like solidify. I don't know what the word I'm trying to use, but it kind of like solidified. Yeah. That, we were a real podcast within the scene, and, big names definitely would say yes to coming on my show. And we talked about the future of 5v5. We speculated a bunch, and it was like a round table, and we just kind of sat there and let them throw. I barely did anything. Maybe that's why I thought it was awesome, because I just sat back and let them talk for once. But we've had other episodes with just guild mates, like just people within our guild that are fans of the podcast. And we just come on and talk about random stuff. And I feel like the shows that I have the least amount of plan for, and I can just sit back and be myself, it is really most important. There's a lot of episodes that my brother Crude and I walk away from. We're like, wow, that was really fun. Like it was loose. We didn't really try hard. I mean, early on, man, I feel sorry for anyone that listened to it early on, because we were just so scripted. We felt like we had to be perfect. We couldn't make mistakes. And as I've gone on and I've listened to other podcasts, I'm like, who cares? Like, I'm just going to be myself. If I say the wrong word, if I stutter, if my voice cracks, like, I'm not going to edit it out. Like, I don't care. Like, that's part of building your personality and just being yourself. I feel like that's what people love the most. And if my brother and I can make fun of each other and sound stupid by saying the wrong thing on the podcast, and that's what I want to do, because it makes us laugh. Maybe it doesn't make other people laugh, but that's when we have the most fun.
It's the truth, right? Like, It's your truth. Like, if that's who you are, if that's who you are in real life, like people naturally gravitate to people who they find are truthful and honest, whether it's somebody who like curses a lot, but that's their truth. And people are okay with that. Like, they will gravitate towards that people, as opposed to someone who's just who you can kind of feel like curses just to curse, or who says things just to say things because it's like a buzzword kind of thing. Like, people have a pretty good like radar for sensing that BS, that kind of like
right,
the forcedness of personalities. People kind of sense it out pretty good for the most part, I think. And people really are drawn to people who are truthful and are just being themselves. And, no matter who you are in this world, if you're doing something, you're creating something, or you're doing something, people will gravitate towards it naturally. You might not be the most followed person in the world. Like, you might not be Drake and have, 89 trillion people following you, but you could have like 1,000,
right.
You could have 500, you could have a couple hundred, like, and people will be naturally gravitated towards you if you just, you just tell your truth and like be yourself and laugh and have a good time and do whatever it is that you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think Ninja said it plenty of times on his stream as well. I mean, kind of what you just said explains streaming a lot as well. People want to go to Twitch to become famous, make a lot of money. And, Ninja says, I didn't start streaming because I want to become famous. Back then, being famous on Twitch wasn't a thing. So it's just like, you want to be just have fun. You want to stream because you have fun playing the game, so you stream it so other people can join and have fun as well. And I feel like Ninja is definitely someone who's stuck to his guns of just being himself. Like, he played with Drake. Like, can you imagine if I played with Drake? I wouldn't be able to keep it together. Like, Ninja was doing all the weird stuff he always does. He did tone it back a little bit, but I mean, Ninja's a pretty goofy guy, and to do that with Drake and not like get made fun of, or Drake to allow that, it's just crazy to think that Ninja was in that situation. I know we've gone back to him a few times, but I feel like he's a pretty good example in some of the stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen a few clips of him, like, kind of really pushing the positivity and like being a good person and, not being a, not being a horrible person and like not bullying people. And, I've seen him say things like that before. And it's good that we have a role model like that that's willing to use their platform to push positivity and like the good qualities that you want in developing people.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some of your goals? One of the last things I'm curious of is like, what are your goals for your podcast, or like, what are you trying to hopefully achieve with whatever it is you're doing?
So the podcast, I feel like the time for rolling podcast, I feel like I'll keep doing that with my brother as long as we can when it comes to Vainglory Esports. I've always enjoyed the esports scene, but now I've really, really fell in love with it and just the community as a whole. And I enjoy kind of taking this journalist type role. I enjoy stalking people on Twitter and finding out information and then writing a write-up about it. There's some famous people within like the other bigger games, like, League of Legends. They have the esports writer, Finn. He's someone he goes to Overwatch and he works for ESPN. And, he's been someone who just wrote articles and just covered esports for fun and, worked his way all the way up. I mean, do I want to do that as a full job? Not necessarily, but I feel like me writing and working more towards just covering esports as a whole would be really cool. Unfortunately, it's hard right now just because I'm getting ready to start grad school and, I have real life going on. I can only do so much. So I focus on Vainglory because it's my main passion. But, no matter what I'm doing, I just want to stay in the scene as much as possible and just keep, whether it's, starting my stream up just for fun or just doing more of my write-ups and just maybe even starting a new podcast, whether that podcast is focusing on mobile esports as a whole and just focus on that market and seeing what's changing in the mobile scene as in esports wise. Obviously there's podcasts out there that talk about mobile games, but more in the esports direction. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. I'm definitely a person who likes to just fall asleep and wake up the next day with a new idea and I see if I can run with it. I feel like that's how the podcast started.
That's cool though. I'm kind of like that too, almost in a haphazard way of like following things that are of interest. And, maybe I do this podcast for 9 months or a year and then I venture off and I do something else, or, like I can sometimes be kind of streaky or inconsistent like that of like following things that I'm interested in to find things that I'm really, really interested in, or like really super passionate in. I think that's something that's important is for people that are trying to figure out like what they want to do with their life or, for a job or a career. Like the number one piece of advice I can give people, if you're not sure what you want to do, is try as many things as possible,
Right.
I'm fortunate that I enjoy my day job and I really enjoy technology and information security and like what I do during the day, that it allows me to have some creative juices flowing in the evenings to kind of do something that's a little bit more creative or a little bit more of an outlet. So I would say, and I'm sure you could echo this too, is do as many things as you can to figure out like what that thing is that you really, really enjoy, and then do more of that.
Yeah. And I think I'll find as I get older that I incorporate maybe esports more into what I'm doing. I mean, literally from listening to your show, I've had other ideas about things I could do. Speech pathology, I can be in the schools working with young kids. I mean, even starting like an after school program within like a school district where you have a facility where kids can come and spend some time studying and then also play video games in whatever community it may be. Having like a community like that or a center. Obviously, I've listened to some of your past episodes with people that have those type of centers where you come together and compete. I mean, if you could have after school programs, I really love the idea of esports bars. I think that's a really awesome idea, being able to go do my two favorite things is drink fancy beer and play video games or watch someone play video games. I feel like that could be a pretty big market. I feel like a lot more of those may be popping up. People like to go to go to a bar and watch sports. I mean, just look at Twitch, and if that keeps blowing up more and more, if I can go to a bar and drink beer with my friends and watch Ninja at the same time, then more power to it. So I mean, who knows what will happen? I think the esports, I think no matter what, will be a part of my future.
Yeah, and something you said was like struck a chord to me is like ideas are, I am kind of the same way. Like I have a lot of ideas by listening to other people and things like that. And until I started acting on my idea for my podcast, like I had an idea for the podcast of like what did I want to do for maybe like a good year of just kind of consuming, getting back into the gaming scene and like getting my feet back under me once again of like the esports world, like a solid year of just kind of research and just following the scene and getting back into it before I actually went through with it. And I was delaying and procrastinating quite a bit. And I was like, you know what? I can have these ideas all I want. And like, I can think about all these things, but until I actually like start doing them or executing on them, it's not going to be until then that I actually get traction and actually, have some sort of body of work that I can say that is things that I've done. And I think it's a testament that you have to execute on your ideas, and some things will work out, some things won't, but at least you'll be learning and trying new things. And I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can't be afraid of failure. I mean, no matter how cliche that sounds, if you have an idea to start something, but you don't want to start it just because you don't know if people will like it, I mean, just start it up. If people don't like it, then your life goes on as it was before, and you just move on to the next idea. But you're never going to know unless you try it. So you might as well put the work into it, see if it sticks, and maybe if it's something you enjoy enough, you'll be doing it for a couple of years. You never know. It's just, there's tons of room out there for a new idea, a new project, and they always can, you can fill those small gaps of something that someone may like to consume.
Absolutely. Last but not least, shout outs. You want to thank anybody or tell people where they can connect with you, where they can find your show. The floor is yours, for any kind of shout outs or anything you want to plug or anything like that.
Well, I will shout out my brother first, just so he doesn't kill me. Co-host Crude Sloth. I mean, he does a lot of work with me. He keeps me sane when things are crazy, or he just knows how much work I put into it. So he is the co-host of the show. Time for Rolling Esports. We normally stick to Vainglory, so if you're not a Vainglory person, you probably won't enjoy the page as much. But hey, if you want to get involved with Vainglory, you should follow us, TFR_esports. My personal page, I definitely like to retweet all things esports, Endless55VG. I follow all the esports scenes as much as possible. Any other shout outs? I don't know. I like to shout out anyone that has something to do with esports that I can learn from. So other podcasts like you, or any other podcast that has something to do with esports, business wise. I just like to take in content as much as possible and just try to learn about something I didn't know. That way I can put it into my useless brain of knowledge, or knowledge that's in my brain that I can maybe pull out one day.
Awesome. Well, everything that you mentioned will be in the show notes. We'll make sure we link up to Twitter and the show and all that, and your Twitter. I think that's about all that I can think of right now. And I just want to say that it's super cool to talk to somebody else who's on this kind of podcast kick, and you've been doing it, quite a few months longer than I have. So I admire your dedication, and I definitely have a respect that I think a lot of people who maybe are not creating on a consistent basis wouldn't necessarily have. So I definitely appreciate and respect like what you're putting into it and effort that you're doing. And I hope you guys have tremendous success with your podcast and just individually as well. And appreciate you coming on the show and chatting with me tonight. It's been a lot of fun. We hit a lot of good topics, I think, that were super good. So thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing your success going forward.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I mean, I don't even know how I found your show. I'm glad I did. I wish you had a show Friday, but, I'm not going to put that pressure on you. Sometimes I listen to your show maybe like Monday morning, 8 a.m., and then I'm like, well, crap, it's over. Now what do I do? That's why I messaged you that one day asking for other shows, because like, man, I need something else to listen to about esports as well. So, hey, if you ever find more time, you should do more episodes in a week.
Yeah, it's funny because when I first started, the first, I think, week or 2 weeks, I did 5 episodes in a row, or I did one episode a day. Like I did 5 days a week. and it was like it was brutal. Like the first 2 weeks, I recorded like 3 or 5 episodes to launch with. So I launched with like 5 episodes, and then the next week I did an episode every day, and it was like I was crushing. Like every spare minute that I had, I was working on the show. Like during the day, and I'm like, all right, if I'm going to do this, like I got to make it somewhat sustainable for myself. So that's why I went back down to 1 episode, but I appreciate the feedback because it is something that I'm like considering of how I can tweak things and make things better or more valuable for people, and like put some more stuff out there. So I appreciate the candid feedback on that.
Well, the difference between your show and like mine is, I mean, you need to find solid guests, and you need to do your research, and you need to make sure you prepare a good show like for your audience. I think that's really crucial for you to find someone, and you venture out into you try to hit every scene as possible. You know, me and my brother can sit down whenever we want and just talk about who knows what. So it's a little different. So I feel like yours is much more of a grind when it comes to research and really preparing. Because when I do my interviews on my show, it is much more intense. I do some research. I make sure I have questions, make sure the show's going to flow well. It is way different than just sitting down and just talking to talk.
Yeah, and I'm like playing around with different ideas of like, I do spend a lot of time like with Vainglory, or, you know, I had a guest on last week, Lycan from the Rainbow Six scene. Like I didn't know anything about Rainbow Six. Like I had to do a deep dive of like Rainbow Six, and like I had to dig deep into Vainglory and see like what is the current events, like what are the things that are worth talking about, kind of thing. And like it does take time. So I've been playing around with ideas of like transitioning to more of a casual chat. Like you'll probably see me do like a not prepared episode coming out soon, of like just kind of sitting down with somebody and talking about things that come up, or like current events and stuff like that, to kind of get a different pace and see how the community responds to that as well. I think it's important to kind of innovate and try new things, even within your own little, you know, world of how you have always done things before.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about that before. If you follow enough people on Twitter, like in the esports scene, I feel like you can find information about a lot of different things, and you could sit down once a week about information you found on Twitter and just literally talk about the drama or the big news that's been breaking on Twitter, and you could do a whole episode just randomly talking about anything. I mean, there would be enough in that sense as well. So, I mean, both ways are beneficial. The planned episodes with really good interviews, and then just the kind of the sit down and talk about whatever comes to mind.
For sure. Well, Endless, thank you again so much. This was super fun. Like I really enjoyed our conversation. I think we hit a lot of things both in the Vainglory world and in esports in general. And we had some life topics there. Like we went some deep. Yeah, we got deep a little there. You know, I like the self-awareness, you know, the failure, you know, chat. You know, I think we hit some really cool things. So I appreciate you opening up and sharing your experiences and your wisdom, and you know, your shining moments and not so shining moments. You know, you opened up a little bit about that too. So I appreciate your like truthfulness and like just being you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, keep grinding, man. I love what you're doing.
Thank you, Endless. I appreciate it. And for everyone listening in, you know what? I just forgot my
your own slogan.
I forgot. Isn't that funny? Like I just had like a mental like. If this all goes as planned, this show is just the beginning.
Thank you, listeners. I really appreciate you. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating on iTunes. I would love a 5-star, but if you think I deserve a 1, let me have it and tell me why.